What do empty bottles of water have in common with our dress slacks of today? And do they have anything in common with Haggar Clothing Company? And the answer is not about the water, but more about the container itself. Join us today on Fit to Stitch and learn all about our modern fabrics.
Fit to Stitch is made possible by Vogue Fabrics, Evanston, Illinois. Valdani Threads. Kai Scissors. Sew Steady. OC Sewing, Buena Park, Fullerton, Garden Grove, and Irvine, California. Richland Sewing Center, Dallas, Texas, and the Metroplex. Fabric Warehouse, Lakeland, Florida. Longview Sewing in Longview, Washington. Paramount Sewing in Eugene, Oregon. And Elliott Berman Textiles, New York City.
The responsible companies of today are not only taking into perspective as to how our fabrics are changing, but they're also looking into our environment to make sure that we are living compatibly to our environment around us. I have a guest today that is just going to deliver some wonderful news to us, and I'm going to welcome Charlotte onto the stage here. Charlotte works for Haggar Clothing Company. They're headquartered right here in Dallas, Texas, and this is a really exciting time for me and for us because we're going to learn some really exciting things that are happening behind the scenes at Haggar. So tell me a brief history of Haggar.
Well, it was founded in 1926, and so we're celebrating our 90-year anniversary, which is very exciting.
That is exciting.
We have a lot of firsts. There's a very rich history. It's a true heritage brand. So we actually invented the suit separates. People used to have to buy them nested and had to get them tailored. We give them a different size pant, a different size coat. We actually coined the term.
That's interesting.
It is.
It's fantastic
because
that really gave men the opportunity to not be the perfect body up and down. Is that fair?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so they could buy a different sport coat with a different slack.
Exactly. They could get the sizes that actually fit their body.
And so Haggar was the one who pioneered that.
Haggar did it.
Wow, that's great.
And we also invented the term slacks.
Okay.
It means it comes from the slack time that you have between office and evening.
How interesting.
Yeah.
So the word slack doesn't even mean anything different than pants. It's just how you all interpreted the product to be worn.
It's just that slack time.
Wow. And you got it into Webster even.
Yes.
All right. So, and tell me what else happened in that history, because 90 years is a good long time and you've seen a lot of changes.
Yeah, absolutely. So they were doing military uniforms at one point. We had Texas domestic manufacturing at one point. We have so many firsts. We were the first apparel company to advertise on TV.
Wow.
That's kind of exciting.
That is a lot of firsts. And then everybody else followed you and copied you.
Yeah, we were very innovative. We're a true heritage company.
That's really exciting. So tell me a little bit about this particular fabric. How have the fabrics changed? 90 years, you have to have seen a lot of fabrics. Not that you're 90 years old, but you would have still had to have seen a lot of change in fabrics. And I know you know all about those changes.
Yes, absolutely.
Tell us about the fabric.
Well, being the 20s, most of the menswear was wool or a wool blend. And so
in the 1920s?
In the 1920s.
Okay.
And so then as time progressed, polyester was invented in the 40s, and then DuPont bought the rights.
Okay.
And then it kind of rose during the 50s as the cheap fabric.
So question for you there, if DuPont bought the rights, did Haggar have to buy from DuPont directly? Or they just bought the rights to actually produce the fabric and then distributed the fabric to everybody?
Well, they bought the rights to produce the fibers, I believe.
Okay,
yes.
So DuPont's big, and they, all right, so that's when the polyesters first started, or were first introduced. And it was a wool poly blend?
There were probably some blends at the beginning. I think when polyester first came on the market, it really came on with a bang. They were like, this is a great, cheap alternative. It kind of grew during the 50s is really when you started seeing it in the actual market.
So companies launched it, but how did they know it would be successful?
Well, I think it was a combination of things. It was a cheaper fabric, it was durable. Um, it was really what the market wanted at the time.
Interesting.
Mhm.
So interesting. It's interesting as we hear about companies who kind of know what their customer wants. And I always wonder, does the customer know it first or does the company create it? And kind of the customer says, hey, that's a great idea. I'm going to do XYZ
Right.
and I'm
Well,
going to wear slacks.
true innovation should be finding a problem that people just accept as fact.
You're
They
right.
don't really think there's a solution for it, and then you find a solution and get it to the
So
market
it sounds like
first.
Haggar's actually been an innovator of
Absolutely.
slacks.
Yes.
All right, so we went to then the polyester was introduced, and these are
Mhm.
actually from,
These are from the 70s.
wow.
So these are the infamous double knit.
Wow.
And
And
so
they don't look from the 30s at
oh, they
all, do
look
they? I mean,
they're
from the
from the
70s.
70s. Yeah,
But they
they
don't,
look
that's,
fantastic.
I was thinking that was 30 years old or 40 years old.
Right.
They just don't look that old to me at all.
It held up very well. It's
I guess.
indestructible.
I guess. So these were 100% poly or?
These are 100% polyester, and then it's the double knit is the construction of the weave.
Got it. Okay. And so then how did we progress over the years?
So this is something we use today. It's a lot lighter.
It's a lot lighter.
It's a
It's
lot
a lot
lighter.
finer.
It's finer. It has a lot more drape to it. It's not so bulletproof as this
Boy,
is.
it is. It's really, and you guys can't feel these, but boy, is this nice.
It's very, very
Doesn't
soft.
feel, and this is 100% polyester.
This is 100% polyester, and
Wow.
it's got some mechanical stretch. So the yarn itself is actually kinked, so it has room to almost accordion out. So and it has great
Interesting.
recovery. So it's an alternative to putting spandex into a pant.
So when Haggar sells a pair of pants like this to a customer, do they figure how many years a customer will keep those pants, roughly?
Well, we hope that he would keep our pant for a long
For a
time.
long time, sure.
And we know that polyester is still pretty indestructible. It's very
Sure.
durable. It washes great. It's in a lot of cases you don't have to iron it. You can just wash it, hang it up, and then put it on and get
And
out
tell
the
me
door.
the size of your customer.
So our average waist size, our average customer is 50 plus in age, and his average pant size is 38 waist and 29 inseam.
That's pretty good.
It is.
38.29, I think.
It is. It's very middle America. It's a big
Sure.
a big.
And tell me about the
Group of guys.
insides, because the
So-
insides over the years.
Yeah, so this one's really exciting. So Haggar had this Expandomatic waistband that we did in the 70s. And if you notice, this pant doesn't have any belt loops on it because this was really designed to hold you in and not need a belt. And so
Kind of
men,
like a girdle for women.
it is like a girdle. Guys would say that they would take this off at the end of the day and they would have the imprint of the elastic. But they loved it because it was like a lower back support.
Sure.
And
Sure.
so we reinvented this for modern times. And so this has actually a lot of great stretch in the construction,
Okay.
which is a little difficult to do with all the seaming.
Sure.
And so it's very, very comfortable. And it's reminiscent of the original Expandomatic, but it's really great, clean update.
So when they do this Expandomatic, you still buy your waist size. You just expect it to give a little bit, basically.
Well, yeah,
You
this is
still-
all about comfort.
Got
So
it.
if you buy a 34, when it's flat and not expanded, it's a 34. But if you go up an inch, if you go down an inch, it's really going to move
Like
with
during
you.
dinner?
During dinner, over time.
Perfect. Perfect. Oh, that's awesome. So all of these lead us to a current.
Yes.
And I've heard this term ecol.
Eclo.
Eclo.
Yes.
Eclo. Okay, tell us about this. This is just really exciting because this actually introduces our bottles of water.
Yes.
Tell us about
So Eclo is Haggar's label that we produce. That's just our name for the pant program.
that. Okay.
But it actually uses a recycled polyester yarn. So this pant is still technically 100% polyester, but about 80% of it is a new polyester that's just spun normally, and 20% actually comes from recycled water bottles. So they take the bottle, they chop it up, they melt it down, and they spin it like they would normal polyester. And then 20% of that goes into this pant, and it's about 3 bottles per pant that we're keeping out of the
Wow.
landfill.
That's incredible. And we're taking it out of the landfill and putting it on people's body.
Yes.
That's responsibility to me as a company in every facet. That's just screams responsibility.
Yeah, it's great.
Very exciting. So I've heard that Haggar is the #1 dress slack in America.
Yes, this
that
is
true?
actually this is the guy right here. This is our number one,
Really?
the #1 dress pant in America. We have research that proves it, and you know it's our classic
Wow.
fit. It comes in a plain front, which is the #1, and the pleat has actually now hit the #2 spot.
When I look at and feel this fabric, never in a million years
Oh,
would
no,
you think
it's-
this has plastic bottles of water in it.
It's so great.
I mean, that's just amazing.
And the recycled poly actually does give it a little bit softer hand. tends to be
It's
the effect.
beautiful.
But yeah,
Great
it's
drape.
great
You can
drape.
control all of that.
Mhm.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for being
Yeah,
here
thank you
today.
for
This
having
was just such a treat. Congratulations on your 90 years and
Thank
hopefully
you.
another 90.
Yes, we hope so.
Thanks so much, Charlotte. All right, so what Haggar didn't do, or at least here in the States, what Haggar has not done, is they haven't gone into women's pants. So Haggar, we know, is primarily the development of men's pants. And along came Liz Claiborne. And Liz Claiborne really revolutionized the pant for a woman. So let's talk about just the makings of a pant and what happens and what goes into it, because I think it's really important to understand this so that when we go into the fitting and construction, we'll really know what takes place. Just two things I really want to point out to you. The pant is made from a skirt. So what happens is there's a cut made, and that cut goes from the hip line to the crotch line, and it's opened up. So that's simple enough in itself, but let's look at what happens. Whenever I open or introduce a dart into a pattern, I'm never going to know exactly how big it should be. So when we go to fit pants, we want to be aware that this has happened. And actually what happens is this one, I built the skirt onto the base, and then you can see where the opening is. That opening is an approximation. We just don't know how big it is because it's dependent on the size of the rear end of a woman. And we all know as women, we gain all our weight in our rear end and we lose it all in our rear end. Or we lose it all someplace else, I think is what really happens. And so it's really hard. The hardest thing about fitting women is their rear end. So I want to go over a couple things for you because what Liz Claiborne did to the industry was completely revolutionary. The very first thing she did was she lengthened the depth from the waist to the crotch. So typically in a man's pant, that's shorter because their rear ends are not as big and they don't have to go around their rear end, whereas women have bigger rear ends. So then what she did is she actually shortened the crotch length. Now, when I get into these pants and fitting them, I'll kind of go over each one of these and where those parts are. I just wanted to give you a heads up. But the major thing she did was right here through the waist, through the hip, because in all of men's pants, men are on this end of the curve. And so they just don't have a lot of curve. That's, I guess, the difference between men and women. We women have curves. We need curves. So we're on this curved end of the French curve. And she gave much more curve to the top part. And what that does is actually gives more circumference around the body of the pant. So it's really important to basically understand those differences. There's not a lot that goes in front of the pant. I do want to point out just some basic principles of pants that we should all know. The first is the dart. We know that the very first dart is 4 inches from center front, and we know what happens with that is it turns into the grain line. So notice it's perpendicular to the crotch line, and that goes all the way from the bottom of the dart to the center of the hem. And what we know about pants is if they're not cut straight a grain, then they will not hang straight. So that's a really important principle, is that from the crotch line down, they need to be straight a grain with this line. If you notice, this is off grain, this is off grain, everything else is off grain, but that needs to be straight. Then what we know is the side dart is just optional. If a woman has a straighter body, we don't need it, we can eliminate it, but we don't want to ever eliminate this dart. In jeans, it's actually split, and it's split between the center front and the side, but we want to keep that dart in place, and the grain line is really important. And as we fit this, we'll kind of fit around the grain line and we'll visit back. So let's bring Jeannie on, and we're going to do some draping on Jeannie so that we can really get this pant fit down. And it's so much easier than we've made it. Unfortunately, there's been some really wrong information out there about pants. We're going to clear it all up. And if you follow along, promise your pants, you're going to love them. All right, Jeannie, let's first get the pant on. And I'm going to just put the pins so they don't stick your tummy. Is that hard? They look like they're going sideways. Now, the first thing we're going to do when it comes to pants is we're going to let her put the crotch where she wants it. Don't make the mistake of putting the pattern waist where my waist is. That's not going to happen. And we're actually going to put the crotch where she wants it, and then we're just going to mark the waist where it falls. So basically, we're going to be moving that waist up and down. All right, so you got the crotch where you want it, and what secures that crotch in place is the circumference. So the reason these were hanging farther down was they were too big. Is that fair? When you pick out your size is your circumference. You want to go as close as possible as you can to the right size. If your waist is thicker and your hips are smaller, go by your hips and just go to a bigger size when you're going to your waist. Don't make by your waist size because everything below will just be way too big. Now, Jeannie's waist is larger than her hips. So she's going to find that her pant, the legs, are a little bit too big. And let's go ahead and take that in a little bit. If you'll hold that up. These legs she showed to me and she said, I don't want those big of legs. So we're literally just going to take these in from the side. Because this is a pattern, this is not the final fabric, I don't have to be respective of that grain line. The grain line will still be okay, my pant will still hang straight. I can just take a big chunk off the side and call it good. And then all I want to do is the amount that I take away, I'm just going to work it right back into the hip line and make it fit really beautifully smooth. Keep your pins vertical. And then after that, we're not going to do this right now, but Jeannie wants to make sure that she can walk, that she can sit down, that she can move. When I take away circumference, I take away mobility. So we want to be really careful to find that fine balance between where she's comfortable. The thinner the pant is, the thinner you'll look, but you don't want to get them so thin that you just can't, kind of like a hobble skirt. We don't want to do that. Okay, so we've thinned that in. When we do that, it will cause some wrinkles, but that's okay. It's length first. That was the crotch. Circumference, we took some in, and we're going to go to the back, and we're going to deal with depth. And we're going to keep on this leg here, because this is the one we changed. We only need to change one. And remember at the very beginning, this fits beautiful through the waist. If not, I could adjust the darts, but that really fits nice. Remember when we talked about slashing the back of that skirt? That's where it becomes too long. This is called the crotch length. If that's too long, and her rear end doesn't take it all up, it all falls down below. Now, even though you're looking at these pants and you're saying, well, that fits fine, this is the problem, it's not true. Actually, if there's any wrinkling down here, it's the fault of the hip line. So because I know exactly where that was added, watch what happens when I pull this up. So I'm basically kind of correcting how much the skirt was opened. It was just opened up a little bit too much for her, and you can see the difference now of what happens. So it's very tempting as we do pants to go and say, okay, there's a problem here, I'm going to fix it here. But so, especially in pants, the problem here is usually not here. It's usually coming from up here, and just because there's not enough rear end to take up as much pant, the excess falls below. I always say it's kind of like a cow neck. There's just not enough to take it up, and it kind of falls down below. So there you start to see that beautiful leg. And it should hang, a slack is what we're doing. In Charlotte's terminology, I like that. Slacks is where we wear them that slack time. That's kind of cool. Learn something new on that. You can see that there's really just a beautiful fall from there. Go to the waist, and then what I'm going to have Jeannie do is reach to the back, Jeannie, and I'm just going to mark your waist for you. You can use a piece of elastic if that's more comfortable for you, just so you can kind of feel where that waist is. All right, so I'm just going to mark that there. I got it. And then give me a point on the side. Nothing says that that waist has to be straight. So all you have to do is connect it here and all the way around. All right, and then you keep going. So you can put the pant exactly at the back where you want it and exactly at the front where you want it. Are we good? Those are beautiful. They look really nice. So Jeannie's made up a final pair. We're going to go put those on, and while we're doing that, I'm going to make some pattern changes. So let's look at this pattern on the table. I've got the front and I've got the back. When I first started teaching this years ago, I remember coming out of a class and a lady said to me, that woman's got rocks in her head. There's just no way I'm going to slash up the back of my pant. So let me just make a few clarifications for you. This being the back, this being the front. This is the area that I took out of Jeannie's. So what I did is I folded that over, and I ended it right there at the end of the tissue. So when I tape that down, recognize that the pattern will still lay flat. This is not going to be in my final product. I think she thought that I was going to just embroider choo-choo trains all the way across the back of her rear end, and she was somehow going to wear that forever, and that's not the case. So I pinned that up, and then we cut her waist down a little bit. So when we took that off, and you're just going to measure what it is, you can slide that down. You don't need to move the darts unless you've really taken a lot off. You'll have to lower those darts a little bit down, but otherwise that will work well. When I took all that off the side, you'll want to go back, and what she needed in particular was she needed it at her waist. So I actually left it at the waist, and it was a little more straightening down this side. Let me tell you that there's two things you can do with this. The first is I could take that muslin that we draped, I could sew it up, I could reduce the seam allowance down to 3/8, and I could take it apart. And I could actually draw in the grain line, because what we know is the grain line goes from our center dart to the center of the hem. And even if you don't have a center dart on the pattern you're using, it goes 4 inches in from the center back or center front, and it goes down to the center. So I could go ahead, use that muslin, reduce the seam allowance down, make all my changes, put it back on, make sure it's right, and then simply take it apart, draw on the grain line, and use that as my pattern. There's nothing that tells me that I really have to make these changes back and forth. Now, a lot of times, just because women want to keep that muslin intact, to keep trying it on and see how their fit has changed, they prefer to make the changes to the tissue. And there's not a right and a wrong. Either way is okay. But I do want to show you a couple changes. So if you want to, I want you to look at this for a minute. Notice how the side seam, I just really curved that in. A lot of times, even in dress slacks, with women, we want to have a little thinner leg because that thinner leg will just look a lot better on us. So you can see that where the French curve went out, and then what it did is it pivoted directions and came in. And I can change that right at the crotch line is generally when that happens. And then, of course, it goes to the knee. When I start to slim in that knee, if I get too tight, I just can't move. So that's a real key factor. And what I heavily recommend as you're starting to fit these and design these, a couple key points that you're going to remember. I would go through your slacks that you have in your closet. See, I'm calling everything slacks now. Pants, it doesn't matter what you call them. But I would go through them and I would measure the circumference at the hem, and I would measure the circumference at the knee, and I would measure the circumference at the thigh. Because then what you're doing with the leg is you're really playing kind of dot to dot. You know this is going to come in, this goes to center back, it doesn't affect anything else. I know I'm going to lower the waist. I think the number one thing that I see is women make pants too complex. One of the things you've been taught is you've been taught to scoop out the crotch. And we want to show you why you're not going to do that. So just for fun, we're going to scoop the crotch. And y'all aren't going to do that. Do not try this at home, right? Do not scoop the crotch. Because you can see what I did is I actually made this line longer now. And that line being too long was the problem we had in the first place, which is why we put in the dart. Also, it subtracts from circumference. So it's really important when I deal with pants. Pants are not hard, but I think they are definitely what happens if we don't understand length, circumference, and depth. And if we don't treat them individually, then one will affect the other. And the goal in pants is this is our length from waist to hip. This is our circumference going this way using our French curve. And our depth is actually coming through the back crotch. So each of those needs to be respected and changed individually. Otherwise, we'll just have a domino effect. And when we start to do things like this, we'll affect circumference, we'll affect length, we'll affect all three. The beauty of the pant is if you notice that once I have the shape of my crotch, my hip, and my waist, I can repeat that every single time in every single pant I'm making. I don't have to recreate the wheel. All I have to do is fix the styling at the bottom. So let's bring Jeannie back on. In her beautiful dress slacks, everybody needs a pair of black dress slacks. So we did these in black. I want to show that great rear end, Jeannie, if that's okay. And you just notice how beautiful they hang off the back. And that's really what we want. That's the way to make us look the very slimmest we can. We don't want those legs to be too big. And keep in mind, this is a process. So let's say we come through and we've made the pant and we have a little bit of wrinkling back there. That just means that maybe we need to just pick this up just a little bit more. And you don't need to change this pant because this pant looks terrific. But maybe what I could do is go back on my pattern and just pick up just a little bit more, and you can see how beautiful that hangs. Thank you. They look amazing. So now you have everything you need. You have everything you need to make a perfect pair of pants. Just take it step by step, just like we did. Don't bring in any old information. Just keep it fresh and new and simple. Don't make it complex, because I know you ladies and you'll make it more complex. Join us next time as we talk about jeans. We have a jeans specialist. It is exciting. Join us next time on Fit to Stitch.
Fit to Stitch is made possible by Vogue Fabrics, Evanston, Illinois. Valdani Threads. Kai Scissors. Sew Steady. OC Sewing, Buena Park, Fullerton, Garden Grove, and Irvine, California. Richland Sewing Center, Dallas, Texas, and the Metroplex. Fabric Warehouse, Lakeland, Florida. Longview Sewing in Longview, Washington. Paramount Sewing in Eugene, Oregon. And Elliott Berman Textiles, New York City. Get your 4-DVD set of Fit to Stitch Series 5. Here's how.